And yesterday we talked about seeds, and today we're going to talk about roots and stems.
For what?
So I guess we can get, do you have any more questions come up since yesterday? Things you want to know about seeds or anything else? No? Okay, now we can get started. Remember how to do this. All right. Okay, start with roots. So, the root system is very important, a very important part of the plant. I guess all the parts are important, but roots absorb water and minerals from the soil. They anchor the plant in the ground. They store food that has been made in the leaves by photosynthesis. So those are three main functions of roots. The parts of a root. When a seed germinates, the first structure to appear is the radicle, which grows into the root. And this root looks hairy because it's covered with root hairs, and we'll talk about those later on. So the first root is called the primary root. That's the main root that goes down into the soil. And then other roots branch out from the primary root. They're called secondary roots. Parts of a root. Now we're looking at a microscopic image of a tiny root tip. And we're looking at the inside of the root. And the apical meristem, that's at the tip of the root. It's where cell division takes place, and that's what creates new cells. So that's an important part of the root growing, is creating new cells. And covering the tip of the root is a root cap. That's the cells in the root cap get worn off as the root pushes its way through the soil, and it's replaced by more cells from underneath, and that protects the rest of the root, because sometimes the root goes through some pretty rough soil. There's little pebbles and sand and stuff that could wear out, could damage the root, and so the root cap protects it as it's pushing itself through the soil. The root's covered by a skin-like substance called epidermis. The surface of the root is protected by skin cells called the epidermis. And water and minerals enter the root through the epidermis. And in the center of the root is the vascular system. The vascular system transports water and nutrients up to the stem and leaves, and it also brings food made in the leaves down to the roots. So the vascular system in a plant is like our veins and arteries that pump blood around in us. It moves things around within the plant. Here's a cross-section of the root, and the vascular system is there in the middle, and the part of the vascular system that carries water and nutrients up to the leaves is called xylem. And that's made of large cells that merge together to form tubes that go all the way from the root up to the leaves. And the part of the vascular system that carries food down to the leaves is called phloem. And the xylem tubes are usually just hollow, filled with water that's being transported. But the phloem is more complete cells that, with the nucleus and everything else that goes on in the cell. And instead of being empty tubes like the xylem, the food that's being transported gets transferred from one cell to the next. And we usually think about phloem carrying food down from the leaves to the root, but it can carry food in any direction, where it takes it wherever it's needed. And food is stored in the cortex of the root. So that's in between the epidermis and the vascular system in the middle. Some plants have root hairs on their roots. They form on the young roots right behind the area where it's growing. They're actually extensions of the cells in the epidermis. If you look closely at this diagram, you can see that the hair is part of that cell on the surface of the root. And what the root hair does is it greatly increases the surface area of the root, so it can absorb more water and minerals from the soil. So it's in contact with a greater amount of the soil. All right, so here's another section through a root. And cell division takes place at the tip of the root, creating new cells, the apical meristem. So that's the region where cells are dividing. And just back from that is the region of elongation, where the cells are no longer dividing, but they're growing longer. And so the elongation of the cells plus the cell division is what makes the root grow longer. We move around by expanding and contracting our muscles. A root of a plant moves just by growing, by elongating cells and making more cells. Then behind the region of elongation is the region of maturation, where the cells are, they're older, cells are older and they're maturing, taking on their final functions in the root. And then there's the root cap that we already talked about, covering the tip of the root to protect it. So, what are the functions of a root? Chris, you'll have to.
That's right. They're calling out water.
Yeah.
Anchor the plant. Store food.
Yeah.
Yep. Anything else you want to look for, Steve?
Well, they support the plant.
Yeah, they said anchor.
Yeah, okay, good. You got it. And the tip of the root, what kinds of cells are the only ones that divide? What are they called? That's a new name.
It's 2 words. What? It's close. Apical meristem.
Yes, meristem.
You want to flash that one up on the screen real quick? Steve, you want to show it?
Okay. Let's see if we can go back to that. There it is. Apical meristem. Apical means that it's at the tip, at the end.
Yeah.
There are other meristems in other places in the plant.
Cool. Good.
All right, epidermis. What is it and what does it do?
The protection, it's the skin.
Yes.
And what? Takes up minerals and water.
Yes, very good. And where do the root hairs grow from?
From the epidermis. Yeah.
From the epidermis?
That's right. And the functions of the xylem and the phloem.
Transport water
Transport water
and nutrients.
and nutrients.
From the leaves.
Okay, which one transports the water up and which one transports the nutrients down?
The xylem transports water and nutrients. Down. No. Down. Up, yeah.
Xylem goes up.
Good.
And then phloem?
Down.
Phloem will be down.
Good. And where is food stored in the root? Storing food is one of the functions of the root, and where does that happen?
Cortex.
Cortex, very good.
Yes.
All right, now, there are two types of root systems. The root system's organized in two basic ways. It has to do with the organization of primary and secondary roots. So here's two types of root systems. A root system with one primary root and many secondary roots branching off of the primary root is called a taproot system. So the main root is a taproot. So that's plant B, the one on the right. A root system with no dominant primary root, but with many primary and secondary roots of similar size is called a fibrous root system. That's plant A. So let's look at characteristics of these two. With the size of a root, the fibrous root is usually thinner and shorter. A taproot can be very thick and very long. Think of a carrot. That's a taproot, and it can be very thick compared to the root of a grass plant, for example. And the depth of the roots, fibrous root usually doesn't go as deep as a taproot. Some taproots can go very, very deep, many feet down into the soil. I think the deepest root that they've found is something like 68 meters deep from a large tree. That's pretty deep. Advantages of each. A fibrous root is good at holding together the soil, improving its structure, and thereby decreasing erosion. It's got these many roots that go out into the soil and hold it together so it doesn't wash away, and it helps to improve the soil structure. And taproot, the advantage is that it can go deep into the soil and break up compaction in deeper levels. And it also can obtain, since it's down there deep in the soil, it can obtain water from deep in the soil. So that's good when it hasn't rained in a long time to have a taproot that goes really deep. So what type of root system is this? The taproot. You see the primary root, that's the taproot, and then the secondary roots branch off of it. And there's a fibrous root system. There's another taproot system. And look at that fibrous root system. Is that the kind of trees you have growing on the beaches in Curacao?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the coconut.
Uh-huh.
I think the taproot
Okay.
of like a wabi tree. That one
Yes.
root, that would come down.
Yeah.
There's a pioneer tree. It's a nitrogen fixer. Lots of
Uh-huh.
smokes, but it has a deep taproot, kind of like a mulberry.
Oh, yeah. All right, so here's some examples of taproot and fibrous root systems. So fibrous roots, maize, onions, grasses, coconuts, rosemary. Most monocots have a fibrous root system. We learned yesterday we learned about monocots and dicots. The monocots have one cotyledon in the seed, and the dicots have two cotyledons. This is another thing that distinguishes the two, that most monocots have fibrous root systems
Okay.
and not taproots.
Which one?
Dicots often
Well,
have
we got
taproots, but not always.
They say most monocots have a fibrous root system. Which monocot does not have a fibrous root?
Do you have an example of a monocot that does not have a fibrous root system?
No, I don't know of any.
So it's the vast majority.
Yeah,
Good. Okay.
yeah. And rosemary is not a monocot, but it also has a fibrous root system. There are some dicots that have fibrous systems, but I'm not aware of any monocots that have a taproot. So taproots,
Another question here, Steve.
yeah.
Taproot at the bottom, you have remember the name.
Apical
Where the
meristem.
cells- where the cells are made.
Yep.
So those who are digging it out.
Yeah.
You find out a great old gap.
Mhm.
Means that is it's not making cells anymore. Then it's gonna heal the site or the plant gonna die.
So the question is, if you have a plant that has a taproot and you dig it out of the ground, but you break off the apical meristem and then replant the plant, is it going to die?
If that's the only thing you've done, probably not. Because there are plants are more resourceful than that. They have other places where there are meristems, and they can grow more roots from off of the taproot. You know, all of the secondary roots also have meristems at the tip of the roots, and even if you break off all of the secondary roots, with some plants that might be enough to kill the tree. With other plants, they will develop new roots, new meristems, and grow new roots.
Good. All right.
Yeah,
Good.
real interesting question. Good. So taproots, these are things that we're familiar with. Carrots, sweet potatoes. Do you have dandelions in Curacao?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. They must be everywhere in the world. Tomatoes, watermelon, neem trees all have taproots. So let's look at a healthy root system. A healthy root system is white or nearly white. It smells fresh or earthly. If roots are black, brown, dark orange, and if they smell rotten or sour, the root system is having problems. So watering a plant properly is one of the most important ways to keep the root system healthy. There's an example of healthy and unhealthy roots. If plants are grown in pots, be sure that there are drainage holes to allow excess water to drain. Watering too frequently or too much is a common cause of unhealthy roots. Soil that's too wet has limited air exchange. And yesterday we learned that seeds need oxygen to germinate. Well, roots also need oxygen. You know, they, just like us, they need to breathe. And so if there's too much water in the soil, that limits the amount of air that's in the soil, and roots can, basically they drown. So, summary. We did this, didn't we? Okay. Okay. These are some things that we didn't go through before.
Then we covered some of it. We're going to review it again. If you guys want.
Sure.
Steve, why don't we go back to that first one? It doesn't look like we covered everything on it. We can do the other-
Okay.
So what are the three functions of the root again? Water, stability, store food. Yeah,
That's good.
another name for a primary root. Another name for it.
We were just talking about it. Two types of root systems.
What's another name for the primary root?
That-
Taproot?
Taproot, yeah.
And the tip of the root, what kind of cells are the only ones that divide?
This is a good review.
Want to pull up the cross section of a root for this one, Steve?
All right. That's way back there.
Anybody got a guess? Apical meristem? Apical meristem, Steve?
Yeah, that's it.
Yep. So I have a question, Steve. Is that the name of the region, or is that a kind of cell? Like you said, it's the question is, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. The apical meristem would refer to the region, and a meristem cell would refer to the type of cell.
Gotcha. All
So
right.
it's basically meristem refers to the dividing of the cells. And so it can refer to that type of cell, or it could refer to the region of the root.
So the meristem cells can be found in other plots on the root system. The apical meristem, the
Yeah.
tip, the primary root.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll find out in a little while that there are meristems on stems as well as on roots.
Is that clear? Yeah, what's the epidermis? What does it do? Skin? It protects the root,
Absorb water.
absorbs water, absorbs nutrients,
And it grows root hair.
grows root hairs. Anything else? Sounds pretty good to me. What is the function of a root hair? Absorb water and nutrients,
And become secondary.
can become secondary roots. I would say it expands the surface area of the root itself. That all sound good, Steve?
Yeah, sounds very good.
Great. All right. What are the layers of a root that a water follicle must go through to get to the xylem in the center? So what are the layers? What's the outermost layer? Epidermis. Yep. And what? Cortex. And then? Phloem. Would it be phloem, Steve?
No, you
It might go through the phloem. Doesn't have to.
Would it go from cortex and then into the xylem, or is there another layer?
So it has to go through the epidermis and then the cortex.
And then the green part.
And then
In a small root, it can probably bypass the phloem and go straight to the xylem.
what do the green colored cells represent, Steve?
That's a good, you stumped me. I remember, yeah, scientists like to name every single thing. So I know the ring around the vascular bundle is called the endodermis. So the epidermis is like the outer skin, and that's like an inner skin. Um,
So maybe something you could look up and get back to us on.
I think it's called the pith, Pith. It might have a more technical name as well.
Yeah, we could look at.
Yeah, so I'll have to look that up for you. This is good. You stumped the teacher.
Okay.
All right, so follow that water molecule.
If you want to leave it up, I have the quiz question.
Okay.
So describe the functions of the xylem and the phloem. So what does the xylem do? Take water upwards to the leaves.
Good.
And the phloem? Take food, nutrients down from the leaves and fruit.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Where is food stored in the root? In the cortex.
Yeah.
How can you tell if a root is healthy? White. White? Yes. What do you mean by fresh? It doesn't smell rotten. It smells good, not rotten.
It's
Yeah, I think that's pretty good.
Yeah. It's not slimy. All right. Is that it? We do it all?
What would slimy denote, Steve? What does that mean?
Say that again.
You said it's not slimy. Why? What would slimy mean?
Oh, slimy means it's starting to decompose. There's bacteria that are growing on it, and the bacteria will make it slimy. So that's very unhealthy.
All right. So,
All right.
the end of this slideshow. Is that right?
Yeah.
Steve?
You can go on to stems.
Is there any questions at this moment?
You're experts on roots now.
All right, I think we're good.
Okay, let's look at stems.
Oh, we got a question, Steve.
Okay.
like carrot. Also, that will all go from the part of that also.
So the carrot is a root, and so does a carrot have all of the pieces of a taproot that we just talked about?
Yes, it does. Yeah, so maybe next time you can bring a carrot and we can slice it in half, slice it across ways, and slice it lengthwise, and we can see if we can locate the different structures inside of the carrot root.
Okay, so we'll try to find a carrot and we'll talk about it. I got another question about a sweet potato.
Uh-huh.
Does it have all the pieces?
Oh, yes. Sweet potatoes have vascular systems going through it. It may have more than one. It may have branches off of the main central vascular system to get to all of the different parts of the sweet potato. But yeah, it'll have all of those parts. And it must have a very thick cortex where all of the food is stored.
So that would make up probably the bulk of the sweet potato. The cortex would be most of what.
Yeah, because the sweet potato is specialized to store lots and lots of food. And that's why it's good for us to eat, is because all that nutrition is stored in it. And so the cortex is where the food is stored. So that makes me think that the sweet potato is mostly cortex.
Good question. Others? Other questions?
Okay,
I think we're good.
all right, on to stems. So these are vocabulary. Well, we can come back to this and see if you know them by the end of the lesson. Functions of a stem. Stems are responsible for the size and shape of a plant. Stems support the leaves so they can receive the most sunlight. Stems move water, minerals, and food throughout the plant. And stems can store food for the plant. So food can get stored in the roots, and sometimes food gets stored in the stems. Structures of a stem. So there's a terminal bud found at the tip of the stem that contains an apical meristem. How about that? There's an apical meristem on the tip of the root and one on the tip of the stem. And it serves the same function. That's where the cells divide, and so the stem increases in length because there's cells dividing and then they're elongating.
That's like on the tip of the on top or on the bottom?
Yeah. So the question is, that's on the very tip of the stem at the very top?
There's a bud on the end of the stem that's like it has the miniature leaves, the leaves that are going to develop there, and it's often covered by some hard scales. And inside that, in the middle of it, where it's actually the tip of the branch of the stem, that's where the meristem is. So it's like the root has the root cap covering it. In the stem, there's usually a bud covering the meristem.
Yeah, there's a picture coming up. They want to see pictures, Steve.
Okay. Wonder if I have pictures. I don't think I have a picture. I'll have to get you a picture. Okay. So what was the other? I need to find out what's the green area in the middle of the stem, and pictures of stem meristems. All right, I've got my homework. So then, any other questions about that?
Nope, we're good.
Okay, so the node is the point on the stem where the leaf is attached. It's not, on many plants it doesn't look any different than the rest of the stem. It's just where the leaf is attached, and that's called the node. And the inner node is the space between two nodes. We'll show some pictures of this. And a lateral bud or axillary bud is on the side of a stem, and it develops into a leaf or a flower. So if you see a bud, that's also where a node is, because that's where a leaf is going to develop. And there's a meristem in there. There's a lateral meristem or an axillary meristem in that bud that develops into the leaf. And lenticule is a small opening on the stem for air exchange. It lets oxygen and CO2 in and out, because stems need to breathe too. So here, good. So we have the nodes and the inner node. And on this one, where it says petiole, that's a name for a leaf stalk. So the leaf is on the end of the petiole. So that node there is where the leaf is attached, and there's also a stem coming out of the node. And on the upper node, between the stem and the petiole, it looks like there's something there. That might be a bud. I can't tell for sure. Does that make sense? Nodes in the inner node, okay?
Hold on, go back.
I see a node into
So
one.
node is where the leaf is coming on. Here's another
okay.
node. So there's multiple nodes on the stem. And in between the nodes is the inter, so in between, inter.
So why is there another node underneath also? Let's go through the of the leaf. About
This here. So they're asking about the bottom 45-degree stem on the left. There's
Yeah.
the internode is right on top of that stem as if it's labeling it as an internode. Is that, could you?
Yes,
expound
it
on that?
is. Because that stem will have another node where a leaf will come out of that stem.
So
So it has inner nodes too.
Steve, this makes me think of a tomato. Is that a good way to think about it?
Yeah, absolutely. This might be a tomato stem. I don't know.
Well, the leaves are different, but
Yeah.
this is where you would really see the example very well. Right. This here? So another petiole. Oh, that would be the bud that we think.
Why has a different view? Yeah, no,
So the petiole is the stem of the leaf coming off. It's not gonna keep growing. It's just gonna make a leaf, and so it's the stem that goes to the leaf. Right, Steve?
That's right.
So there's the main stem, and then the petiole stem that comes off to the leaf. So there's a node here, and then this is like, think of a tomato where it's got suckers, right? So think of this as another growing stem. So this is a copy of this area. So this is a node, it's growing,
It's thicker
and
than
then it's,
the fuel is thinner.
yeah. The
And then-
petiole is smaller, and a internode could be thicker.
Mhm.
See? Yep.
Yeah.
Is that better? Actually?
Now, you can't see it in this picture, but the petiole will have a leaf on the end of it, and the stem will have petioles with leaves coming off of it.
And the internode would be leading to another branch. It'd be the internode on the left is another branch.
Yes. Another branch or another leaf,
Okay.
or both.
Good. Okay. I think we're good.
Okay. So now we have going to cross sections of the stem, and we have little smiley faces here, sometimes called monkey faces. So like a root, a stem has vascular tissue. In a monocot stem, the vascular bundles are scattered throughout the stem. They look like smiley faces. So here on this stem, the smiley faces are upside down, but you can see them there. And then this is a dicot stem. In the dicot stem, instead of being scattered throughout the stem, they're in a ring around the outside of the stem. And in a tree, as it becomes mature, the vascular bundles will become connected with each other, and so it'll be a continuous ring around the stem. So here it is with labels. There's the xylem, which is the larger cells, the larger tubes that conduct the water, and then there's the phloem. And almost always the phloem is going to be towards the outside of the stem, and the xylem is going to be towards the middle of the stem. Even on the monocot, where the vascular bundles are scattered throughout the stem, the xylem will be closer to the center of the stem and the phloem closer to the outside of the stem.
Got a question, Steve?
Yeah.
This structure and with leaves, because you only have like different kind of plants, like cactus, that probably is not of the same person. Agave.
The question is, do these structures only hold true for plants that have leaves? The cactus or the example brought up is like a cactus or an aloe plant. Would that have a different structure than what we're seeing here?
No, in the stem of the cactus or the aloe plant, it would have similar structure. With those plants, mostly what you see, well, no, the cactus, what you see are the stems, and they would have vascular bundles inside of them. The aloe, mainly what you see is the leaves, and the stem is very small down in the base of the plant. So you wouldn't see the stem, but these structures would be there inside of that stem. Because the leaves are so big and they're so close together. In other words, the internodes are very short. So the leaves come out of the stem very close together, and it's difficult to see the stem at all. You'd have to break off the leaves or cut off the leaves in order to see where the stem is on an aloe.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks, Steve.
You're welcome. So there's another thing on here. There's the cambium. And cambium is another type of a meristem where the cells are dividing and growing. And a dicot has a cambium, a monocot does not. So in the dicot, when the cambium grows, it makes more phloem on one side and it makes more xylem on the other side. And so it contributes to the growth of the stem in thickness. So the stem can get bigger around by the growth of the that takes place in the cambium. So otherwise the stem would just be the same thickness all the time. You know, in trees, the cambium goes all the way around, and that's what makes the tree get bigger around as it grows, as it gets older. And each of the rings around the tree is another layer of xylem that the cambium has created to make the tree bigger. And the bark gets thicker because cambium is also making more tissue on the outside of the tree. So it makes more tissue on the inside and on the outside.
Got a question, Steve?
Yeah.
You can only find cambium in dicot and not in monocot.
You can only find cambium in dicots, not monocots.
That's right.
So basically, so the cambium help extends the stem, right?
Yeah.
So how does the monocot get here without the cambium?
So how does a monocot stem get thicker without the cambium?
So a monocot stem gets thicker because the cells that are already there get larger. But if you think about maize, once the stem grows, it doesn't get thicker and thicker like a tree stem does. Or if you think about a coconut stem, it's just as thick up at the top where it's younger as it is down at the bottom where it's older. It hasn't gotten very much thicker, maybe a little bit as the cells that are there expand. That makes sense?
Yeah, you got it, Steve.
Okay, good. What's next? Okay. Why is it not advancing? My computer seems to be hung up.
Take maybe a quick coffee break while we work it out.
Okay, sounds good.
All right.
What's been hanging forever?
There we go.
Very little and then
Huh? What's that?
Yeah, muito. Mais, essa mais, é bom demais. Aí que é mais, vai. làm ở Tây Lan mà đã thì mình sẽ không
Let's do Monday. I want to try to have Hey, thanks, Steve.
Okay,
Ready?
I think it's working.
Okay. Well, we're almost not quite ready.
Yeah.
We need to be there at noon. He is there at noon every day. On Monday, so we will be there. So we should be here 10:30 or 11. So we can kind of sort out. So we can get a spot ready. Make sure we're on time getting there. I'd rather just have 11 here. They should be coming tomorrow. They should. I talked to Garrison today, so I'll check. He said he messaged me before you were coming. They're going to pick them up. They're coming here, so I figured tomorrow we should take some time and set up the hospital. So take the we need to have the race ready. Because that's when so I'm probably going to do tomorrow morning. What time? We can do that. Are we going to get done? So when would you like to? So 9 o'clock.
I saw you. But that's I can call it.
You'll be able to follow that under that file. And then and I'll be sharing it with YouTube channels. I've got it up, but uploading the videos is taking much longer. So I'll be uploading them as fast as I can. You can watch that. What really matters is we'll have a test. So as long as you've seen the material by the time you have the test.
Yeah, I do. Okay.
Not question.
No, for me, it's better. Then I use videos and I go and do some research.
But yeah, you can follow that along.
Yeah. Is there any
We can talk about it more. I got it. All right, guys, let's have our seats. Get going again. Steve, you ready to go?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Come on, guys. Go.
Come on, guys.
Okay. Okay. So here's a cross section of the root, and the green stuff is a pith. Can you see that?
Yes. Yes.
Pith, P-I-T-H.
There.
Look it up.
Nailed it, Steve. Nice work.
Okay. I have another one.
What's the function of the pith now, Steve?
What's that?
What's the function of the pith?
Good question. All right.
Do it again.
Okay. I've got more homework. Next time we take a break, I'll have to work on that one. Here's a picture of the apical meristem of a stem. So on the end, the apical meristem is the reddish blob on the end of this, and the greenish things that are arching up over it are the beginning of leaves, and then there are buds along the side of the stem above each leaf. So there's another one here.
A bud, a meristem.
Here's a diagram that might be easier to see. It's kind of small, but oh, this one has pith too in the middle. So you can see that the meristem is surrounded by and covered with the beginnings of leaves. So it's protected. All right.
There's just the cross section of the plant itself. So the apical meristem at the top, protected by the leaves. So the growing section, as we have the apical meristem in the root, so too do we have the apical meristem stem. But on the root, it's protected by the root cap. On the stem, it's protected by these leaves. Right? So if that gets damaged, it slows down or stops the growth of that root.
It sounds like mother cells. I see that. Like
It's
the root of it, it's like you can use a comparison of this because it's like growing on both sides. Up and down. The roots are going down.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's the section of the plant where the cells can be created freely.
What's that in the root of the section?
The apical meristem.
Basically, they have the same function.
Yeah, there's one on the root going down. There's one on the stem going up. So, but there's other spots on the plant where there's meristems as well, right, Steve?
Yes. There's on this diagram, there's a bud primordia, so that's where a new bud is creating, and there'll be a meristem created in there too. Any bud will have a meristem in it because a bud is waiting for, it's a place where the plant is going to grow.
Good.
All right.
All right, we're good, Steve.
Okay.
Well, time out.
I'm out again. Okay.
You graft it.
Do you mimic like the place from there, or is that the function of the styling?
In the flow.
Is that the only thing that you actually bond together from the
So the question is, when you graft, like a tomato or a tree, what are you doing exactly? Are you just bonding the xylem and the phloem, or are you creating a new meristem?
When you're grafting, what the important part is that the cambium layers line up with each other, because that's the part of the stem that's going to grow new cells and grow a new plant. And so you have to line up the cambium in the cyme that you're putting on and the rootstock that you're putting it onto. And then they will be able to grow together.
Is that because they'll grow new xylem and phloem that will then match up, Steve?
Right, because the cambium is where new xylem and phloem are created.
Good. Good. Other questions?
Yeah, real good questions. We've got a good class here. Okay?
Yeah, we're good. Let's go.
All right. Here we go. Specialized stems. Okay. That's going to do it. There we go. All right. Oops. Spelling error here. We usually expect stems to be upright and above ground. However, many stems do not fit this pattern. Some stems are modified to store food or to help the plant reproduce. Some stems grow beneath the soil instead of above it. So there's 5 different kinds of specialized stems we'll look at here. So a bulb is a specialized stem. At least part of the bulb is a specialized stem. The stem is a very short, flattened stem with many fleshy leaves on it. So in this picture, the stem is actually the little yellow thing down at the bottom of the bulb. And the rest of it is leaves that are folded over the top of each other. You know, when you peel an onion, you peel away different layers, and those are all the layers of the leaf, and the stem is where all those leaves are attached at the base of the onion bulb. So examples of bulbs are onions and garlic.
Would cabbage be another example of that, Steve?
Cabbage grows in the same way, yeah. It's not usually called a bulb, but it's the same type of a structure, very similar, with the stem at the base and then the leaves coming out of it. Yeah.
What about radish, Steve?
Radish is a root.
Okay.
It's a swollen taproot. You know, the thin root comes out of the bottom of the radish and the stem comes out of the top of it. This is another specialized stem. It's similar to a bulb. It's called a corm. But in the corm, most of it is stem tissue rather than leaf tissue like it is with the bulb. In the bulb, the stem is very small and most of the volume is leaves. In a corm, most of the volume is stems. There might be a few papery leaves covering it. And this is another kind of specialized stem, a rhizome, which is a thick horizontal underground stem.
Steve, can you go back to the corm?
Yeah.
What's a more real world example of this?
The gladiolus is one. There aren't a lot of them. Begonias, I think, have corms.
Would a tulip be one, Steve?
No, a tulip is a bulb. It's like the onion.
You said there's not very many examples?
I don't know of many. I don't work a lot with ornamental plants, and I think most of the examples would be ornamental plants.
Okay.
So rhizome, a thick horizontal underground stem. An example of this is another ornamental one, an iris. And I was wondering, taro grows something like this, doesn't it? I've never grown taro, but
Yeah, right.
Yes.
that might be another rhizome.
So you can replant, you can break these apart and replant them, is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
Ginger, turmeric, would those be examples as well?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they would be rhizomes.
Good.
Yeah, good. Here's another one, a stolon. It's another horizontal stem, but this one's above ground. And it's usually involved in spreading the plant. You know, there's sometimes called a runner. The runner goes out and it roots at one of the nodes and forms a new plant there. And then you can cut it and separate the new plant from the mother plant.
Pumpkin, would that be an example? Or sweet
Pumpkin
potato?
does root at the nodes. I've never thought of a pumpkin being a stolon. Huh, but it does grow that way.
Oh, like an elephant grass? So is this, you can think of it as like a node touches the ground and creates roots. That would be an example.
Yes.
Of
Yes, that's what happens.
so sweet potato would be another example.
Yeah, sweet potato can do that.
I mean, this is a strawberry plant.
Watermelon.
Watermelon?
Yeah, sometimes those do. This is, yeah, I'm gonna have to ask a specialized botanist which ones of these plants we could call stolons and which are not. I've never heard of a squash or watermelon stem being called a stolon, but it grows in the same way, doesn't it? It's interesting.
Maybe some adaptation to the climate here.
Caribbean,
Well,
Caribbean.
they do it back home too. I mean, we do have weather similar like this, not year round. Yeah.
I'll have to ask Yashu.
We have a very specialized botanist. Who's very deep in the herbs and specializes in plants. So Steve just said he'll ask her.
Like if you have like strawberry.
Another question, Steve.
Okay.
Strawberry, it starts from the root growing, and we have people who will gather things come out, put a little bit of sand, it will grow from the root, so it has more food.
So let's see if I can. So when a stolon goes out, puts down more roots, and we place sand or soil around the base of the next where the stolon lands.
Yeah.
That improves the strength of the plant because it's mining more nutrients and water from the soil.
Yeah. Yeah. Piling dirt over it will encourage it to grow roots there. And so the roots will go down into the soil. It will be more quick to grow roots if it's covered with soil.
I think that's the spirit of the question more of is it going to improve the main plant?
If you put some compost or some very rich soil on it, then that'll give it more nutrients to get started.
What it makes me think of is I've grown strawberries a lot in the past, and this is a way to propagate strawberries. You can multiply your strawberries. So once it puts down more roots, you can seal that stolon and you can cut it into another plant. And I guess I never thought of it as maintaining as being one plant if you don't cut the stolon. I thought at one point they'll separate their stolon or kill it, and then they'll be separate plants.
That could happen.
But they might just stay together too.
Yeah, they might stay together.
But you may take this thought with the people, and you make a couple in that's the system, and put something like
That's the air grafting though. That's a slightly different.
sounds like you think in this function.
Yeah, that's the idea.
With over plants.
So they're talking about doing like air grafting, wrapping wet heat around like fruit tree branch and encouraging.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that similar to this, Steve?
That's a more artificial thing that doesn't happen naturally. This is with the stolon, the plant is purposefully sending out this horizontal stem so that it can grow roots on the end of it and make a new plant. So, you can create the same process with air layering, but that doesn't make it a stolon.
But it's just an imitation of this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, you're looking at how a stolon works, and you're creating a situation where you're using that mechanism to create roots on a stem of a branch, a fruit tree.
Down, and then eventually respond with the dirt, and then the bony stem, where you get the root system on the back to the facade.
Right.
Very nice.
I think many people are just relating it to other plants that they've seen are willing to take root if they meet similar conditions as a
Yeah,
stolon being covered with some soil.
yeah,
But the definition of stolon is that the plant itself send out and then to
But the definition is that the plant sends out a stem to root somewhere else.
yes.
So when the
Yeah.
root this one, because I have a big fruit tree and I with a particular bulldozer, I made just a line and then the roots from the big tree got sun. So I got all this fruit tree from the big tree came out because of the roots came out exposed to the sun.
She had a fruit tree where some of the roots were bulldozed and exposed to the sun, and then they started sprouting.
Mhm.
I guess, is that related? Is that related? Is that related? Anyway?
If you would do that on purpose, that would be root grafting, or what is it? Root cuttings, using root cuttings for
Alright.
creating a new plant.
Sometimes like pigs do that. Pigs will do it. And then the roots and then
All right, other questions on stolons? No? All right, moving on. Steve.
Okay. The last specialized stem is a tuber. And that's a rhizome, a horizontal underground stem that has a swollen tip where food is stored. An example of that is a potato. So a potato is actually not a root. It's a swollen underground stem. So if you're going to the grocery store, it doesn't matter. But if you're a botanist, then it's a stem and not a root.
so the sweet potato is the root.
So is the sweet potato a root?
A sweet potato is a root, yes.
Yes.
That is different plant.
What's the difference here, Steve?
Okay, so one thing is with a potato, it has eyes, and each one of those eyes is a node. So that's where a new branch would come out. And when you plant it, that's where it sprouts. A sweet potato doesn't have eyes. It might have small secondary roots coming out of it.
It does have eyes because I did that same thing. I did it also.
But it
And
sprouts.
by the eyes, you get.
So they're claiming the sweet potato does have eyes. Steve.
Okay.
The sweet potato is on the other side.
So what is it about?
So where on a sweet potato would you get a new stem? How would you propagate a sweet potato? So if you plant a potato, it sprouts from the eyes. On a sweet potato, what happens?
As well. As well.
Steve, did you hear that?
No.
Okay. So on a potato, new stems come out of the eyes.
Yes.
On a sweet potato, where do new stems come from?
They just come from the side of the roots. Perhaps where a secondary root is attached, where a secondary root would come out if a root was going to go there.
Maybe it's the variety that we see in America. We have different varieties. It's the pink one inside. That's the one you got to get, right? It's several types. I'm not sure why it is. Pink one, yeah. Very nice one. And white
Yes, and white one, yellow.
one.
You have the red one and white one.
The both are white.
And that one doesn't go in the side.
Well, They're pretty adamant that sweet potatoes have eyes, and they want to say that it's a different variety of some sort. Maybe. Maybe.
Okay.
Chris, look,
Second.
what you see over here,
Uh-huh.
that you have a root system.
Yep.
And you have the potato on the side.
Right.
But the sweet potato, you will not have the roots on the side and then the sweet potato. You will have the sweet potato and the roots on the inside.
So with the sweet potato, what they're saying is that in this example, they see a root system and then a potato is on the side. Whereas on a sweet potato, the sweet potato is the root, and then there are secondary roots coming out of it.
Yes. Yes, and with a potato, with a sweet potato, yeah, there's a root coming out of the end. With a potato, there would be a stem coming out of the end. There would never be a root coming out of the end.
So are the nodes are just potential growth areas, whereas a sweet potato has roots coming out of it.
That's right.
So I think they may look very similar, but there is a difference.
Stems, yeah. I will bring a sweet potato.
All right, we're bringing a sweet potato to prove you wrong, Steve.
Okay, good.
I have hope. I have hope.
All right.
I'm always interested in learning more. So,
We have, that is a nice
With the
way
eyes.
to
Yeah.
see the difference how
Oh, but the potato also the same thing. The white potato.
I think we're gonna have to grow some potatoes and sweet potatoes side by side and have a throwdown of potatoes.
sounds like a good idea.
All right,
Potato.
for the time being, yeah,
I
this is
have to
good.
say I'm gonna go tomorrow.
All right,
Okay, so here where we now.
so where's the stem for the potatoes, Steve? Where's the stem at?
The potato itself is part of the stem. That's the end of the swollen underground stem.
It is. So the tuber is the stem. So are you familiar with cassava, Steve? Yucca?
I've seen pictures of it.
Would you care to take a stab at what's the stem on that?
I'm guessing that cassava is a root, but it's just a guess.
Okay. All right. Anything else?
Perhaps.
You passed the test, Steve. But we're
Okay.
bringing potatoes in. It's gonna happen.
So was I right? Was cassava a root?
We don't know. We haven't looked it up.
Okay.
They want a review of the 5 systems again. Steve.
Okay, let's see. Do I have it? Okay. So the first one is the bulb. And there the stem is very small, just at the base of it, and most of it's leaves. And then there's the corm that looks like a bulb, but it's mostly stem tissue and not leaves. And then there's the rhizome, which is underground and horizontal, like an iris or a taro. And then there's the stolon, which is horizontal but above ground. And the tuber, which is a swollen tip of an underground stem. And we don't yet know about a sweet potato.
But what other plants are like tubers? What's other tubers?
What are other examples of tubers?
Oh,
Different kinds of tubers, but like in the region of 1,000 types of tubers.
Different varieties of
Um,
potato?
yeah, there's lots of different varieties of potato. There's a wild plant that grows here, groundnut, that has a similar structure.
So what is peanut?
What would a peanut be, Steve?
Oh, a peanut's not a tuber. A peanut is a seed.
Seeds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A peanut is a strange plant that the flowers are above ground like a normal plant, but once the flower is pollinated, it pushes the flowers down into the ground and the seed grows underground.
That was something else.
You blew a couple minds there, Steve.
Yeah, it's a strange plant.
Flowers go down.
So the flower is pollinated above ground, and then the sperm, for like pollination, like taken below ground to grow into the fruit.
So the peanut is not attached to
The peanut would be attached to the plant through I assume through a stem, Steve.
Yes, yes.
So it's a fruit, it's a nut, but instead of hanging from the plant, it develops underground.
So then it would not be attached.
But there's a stem under the ground. So it,
So the flower is
correct.
flower is colonized.
Yeah.
Then it falls.
No. There's a tube inside of the plant where the reproductive process like travels down. I think it's something that we'll get into in later lectures, Steve.
I guess we're going to have to. All right. We'll look at peanuts next week.
Another question. Would a peanut be a taproot?
A peanut plant probably has a taproot, but the peanut itself is not a root. It's a seed. It's a fruit.
Yeah. It's outside.
And then the map is very nice. So the peanut is something that really good. It has some little secondary use.
Yeah.
Growing out of it, so like that, the peanut only or does it feed the plant also?
So when you pull a peanut out of the ground, it has some secondary roots coming out of it, Steve.
Okay.
Would that feed the peanut only, or would that feed the plant overall?
I would expect it to be the plant. I've never grown peanuts.
A little tough in our environment.
We'll have to grow some peanuts and find out.
It was either me or Steve that was going to come down. So,
That's an interesting crop sales.
you're invited, Steve. You're invited to come down.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. Other questions on this? Before we move on?
All right.
I think we're good.
Okay. So here's a review. Where in this is the xylem and phloem?
All right, guys. Review time. Where's the xylem here? Right? Is it here?
Black.
Is it the small black one, Steve?
On the outside.
The small dark cells are not the xylem.
But
Then it's the other.
where? The smiley faces, wherever those might be in this picture, I can't see.
This one is not quite smiley faces, but This one has a cambium in between the xylem and phloem.
So would the xylem be the
Inside.
larger ones on the other side of that blue layer?
Yeah,
Closer to the
Yeah.
center?
the xylem cells are larger. They're big tubes for conducting water, and the phloem cells are smaller. They're the darker ones, and the phloem was always close to the outside of the stem. The xylem was always closer to the middle of the stem.
Is there any particular reason for that, Steve? The location in the stem?
Separation of water.
Oh, wow. I have to ask somebody smarter than me about that one. I don't know. I mean,
I think
it's that's a really good question. I mean, it's the same with both monocots and dicots, so it's something that's
the water,
pretty universal.
separation of the water.
But it's not gonna evaporate. They're wondering if it would be to protect against evaporation.
Maybe.
To me, I doubt it because it's gonna
No.
have all these other cells first.
That's like a injury or damage, and it reaches the side of the body, you can have water. That's not protection.
So potentially protecting it from damage, Steve.
Yeah, but the phloem needs to be protected from damage too. So here's a thought. On a big woody plant like a tree, the xylem cells die, and even the dead cells, that the cell wall of those cells are hard, woody, and they can still conduct water even after the cells are dead. And that the whole inner part of the tree is mostly those dead xylem cells. And so as the plant is growing, it grows outward and it leaves more of those cells there. And the phloem is their living cells. They can only perform their functions when they're alive. And so by having the cells that are still useful on the inside, you can use them to create a strong woody structure. And you couldn't create that kind of a strong structure out of the xylem cells because they're smaller, they have thinner cell walls. So does that make sense?
What is like what are the nutrients that goes to the flora? What type of, is it watery, is it sugar?
What kind of nutrients go through the phloem? Like, is it watery? Is it syrup? Is it sugary?
Yeah, it's more like syrup, sugary. All of the sugars that are created in the leaves by photosynthesis are transported to the rest of the plant through the phloem. There are other things, proteins and other things that are made in the leaves, and those are transported, moved around in the phloem.
Other thoughts?
Yeah. Okay. Ready for the
We're
next
good.
one?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Is this a monocot or a dicot?
Another group consensus here. One person said dicot. Two
Yeah.
said dicot.
All right, good. Do the vascular bundles look like monkey faces, or they look like candy corn?
Did you point to them, Steve?
Here, can you see the cursor?
Yeah, we can see it.
That's one of the vascular bundles. Here's another one here.
Candy corn.
They're all in a ring around the outside of the stem.
Like a kernel of corn. Can you guys see it, like the triangles?
Yeah, these look more like an acorn with a cap
Yeah,
on it.
that's what came to mind for me.
So yes, this is a dicot. It has the vascular bundles are in a ring around the outside of the stem. They're not scattered around through the middle of it. And they have this sort of roughly triangular shape to them. This is an alfalfa plant. All right, what about this one? Is that a monocot or a dicot?
Monocot.
Yes. Why is it a monocot? Why do you know it's a monocot?
You can see the wings there. You can see the wings.
Smiling at us.
And it's smiling.
Tough to see the smiles. Actually. So why? Why this?
It's
Roland? Fall asleep on? Yeah, no.
But because the bundles are spread throughout the stem, right? Yep.
That's right.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So, some questions.
oh my gosh. You make it.
That's walking water and
Transport water and nutrients.
grow leaves.
Grow leaves.
Grow the plant.
Grow the plant. Where does it grow from?
And
What's the name of that?
you know.
Sounds just like the students back home. What's the name of it? Roel? He pointed at you.
Well, I don't know. I can't remember.
Apical meristem. That's right. And what else does the stem do for the plant? Structure?
Yeah.
Holds itself up. Anything else, Steve?
No, it holds the leaves up so they get the sun. It transports water and nutrients throughout the plant. Yeah.
It can store nutrients too.
Yes, it can store nutrients.
Yep. All right.
All right, question 2. What is the tip of the stem called?
Just
that.
recovered.
Well,
Everyone should. Who's got it? What's the name? Epi what? Yeah. No? You got it. You know. But you got it. Come on. Hear it. There it is. Apical meristem.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a terminal bud, and inside the terminal bud is the apical meristem.
So terminal bud and apical meristem, or just terminal. Oh, both of those would be
Okay.
good.
What kind of tissue does a tip have that allows it to grow? I think you know this by now.
Apical meristem.
Good. We're going to go over meristem so much by the end of this course, that'll be the answer to every question. Okay. So where does the leaf attach to the stem? What is that called, that spot on the stem?
Node.
The node, yes. What are 3 types of tissues inside a stem and their functions?
apical meristem.
Good.
What does it do? It grows? Yeah. Well grown. And another one? Cambium? Cambium? What does cambium do? Cambium makes the rings. It's on the outside. It's hard. But is that what it does? That would be the epidermis. I need a hint here, Steve.
Well, the cambium does the same kind of thing that the meristem does.
It does that same thing for the other two parts of the stem.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about grafting, right? So when you graft something, you're trying to put two, what? You're connecting the phloem and the xylem. That's right. So the cambium does what to the phloem and the xylem? It grows them. That's right. That's where new phloem and xylem were created.
Yeah, so the cambium is like the meristem in that that's where new cells are created.
Okay.
Right? So we got
It is not Marlon's recovering.
so you got xylem, phloem, and cambium. And
So
did
what
we
is-
get the functions of the xylem and phloem?
What does the xylem do? Xylem transports water.
Good. Which direction?
Which direction? Goes upward.
Yes, good.
And the phloem takes nutrients down.
All right. More questions? We just answered that one. What increases the diameter of a stem? We just talked about that a little bit too.
Cambium.
The cambium, yes. Where does gas exchange occur? We only mentioned this once briefly. I don't really expect you to remember that.
It's not just underneath the node. Starts with an L. Even I didn't know this one before we started. I knew. The word reminds me of Lucifer, honestly, but. You want to just toss this one out, talk about it again, Steve? I don't know if
Okay.
this one.
Yeah, this is a lenticel. So it's, next time we'll talk about leaves, and leaves have pores called stomata, and to let air in and out of the leaf. But on a stem, many times the stems have a very tough outer covering to protect them, bark. And for air to get into the stem so that the cells can breathe, it has specialized pores, openings, and they're called lenticels.
Lenticel. Are they under the bark?
They go through the bark. On a big tree that has very thick bark, you wouldn't see them. But on a young branch of a tree, on a twig, you can see these little rough spots, kind of. I'll see if I can find a good picture of a lenticel. All right. Let's see how many types of modified stems we can remember.
5.
Yeah, there are 5 of them. What are they called?
Solid.
Stolon, sewer,
Corn,
full,
rhizome,
rhizome,
stolon, tube.
Give an example of LGBs.
Yeah, yeah. That's good. Let's do it.
Okay,
Let's give an
good.
example.
I
All right, I shall repeat them now.
Bulb is garlic. Bulb is garlic. Corn is
Gladiator.
so rice. Stolon is and cube is potatoes.
All right, so they named the types. They got it.
All right. Good. I think that's the end of it.
Ah.
So now you're experts on roots and stems.
Not extra, I don't know what the tip is.
There's still a question hanging about what a pith is, Steve.
What's that?
Still a question about what a pith is and what
Yeah.
the difference between a potato and a sweet potato.
Okay, well, I guess what I should say instead of that you're experts, I should say you know as much as I do.
Well said, Steve. Well said.
So, do you think the seeds we started germinating yesterday have sprouted yet?
Why
I
don't
don't
we
think,
one or two of them? Let's see.
Oh, that or medulla is tissue of the stem.
the arugula may have been sprouting.
Yeah, no
It's
kidding.
composed of soft spongy cells, store and transfer nutrients surrounding the animal.
Steve, we got a picture of the cassava.
All right. Let me get out of this. Okay, now I'll be able to see it better.
Yeah, there it is.
Okay. It's hard to tell from that picture whether it's a root or a tuber.
There's another.
Uh-huh. It looks a lot like a root. It looks like there's roots coming out of the end of it.
Yeah, yeah. It looks like there's secondary roots. Oh yeah, there's even a root coming out of.
If you cut the cassava, it would look like a carrot.
Yeah.
Say the cassava cut looks like a carrot.
Uh-huh.
It's just right in the middle.
All right, Steve. We've got a Wikipedia definition of pith.
No,
All right.
I
So-
know. It's not the best.
Pith or medulla is a tissue in the stems of vascular plants. Pith is composed of soft, spongy parenchyma cells.
Parenchyma.
Parenchyma, thank you. Which store and transport nutrients throughout the plant.
Oh, all right. So it's more storage, like the cortex.
Storage and transport, though.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it surrounds the xylem and the phloem, so it would have to transport nutrients into those tissues.
It's like the waste.
It's just right in the
There
middle
is.
of the
All right. Well. Oh, one more. No? Okay. We got another picture here, Steve.
Okay.
So you can see the stem coming out the top there.
Yeah.
The roots.
Yeah.
See
They
if I
look
can.
like roots to me. Yeah. It looks more like roots than a stem.
All right, so what? We'll see you again on Monday, right, Steve?
Yes, good.
What are we covering Monday?
Leaves, and we'll, if we have time, we'll go into flower structure as well.
Cool. All right.
Yeah, good.
Good. All right. I'll see you later, Steve.
Bye. See you.
Bye.
Thank you. See, that's cool.